When a hard-working husband discovers his wife's secret affair, his world shatters. But instead of confronting her, he bides his time, quietly collecting evidence and crafting a meticulous plan to expose her betrayal. As he uncovers the depth of her deception, he takes steps to protect everything he's built, from their home to their children, while setting the stage for her ultimate downfall. In this gripping tale of betrayal and calculated revenge, one man proves that even the most predictable husband can strike back in ways no one sees coming. Lisa and I had the kind of marriage that people envied, at least, that's what everyone believed. We were the golden couple. Our house sat in a pristine suburban neighborhood, the kind where lawns were mowed to perfection and kids played basketball in the cul-de-sac. We had 2 beautiful children, a dog that loved jumping on me the moment I walked in the door, and an 8-year marriage that seemed unshakable. On the surface, it was everything I'd ever wanted. But the thing about illusions is that they don't last. I'd worked hard to get us to where we were. Building my small business had taken years of sacrifice, long hours, sleepless nights, and a relentless focus that left little time for anything else. Lisa had supported me through all of it, at least in the beginning. She was there when I signed my first big client, when I finally rented an office, when I hired my first employee. Every milestone felt like ours to celebrate, not just mine. I believed we were a team, and I poured everything I had into creating the life she deserved. For a while, that seemed enough. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. At first, it was subtle. Lisa started going out more, nights with her friends, weekends spent reconnecting with herself at yoga retreats or spa getaways. I didn't think much of it. I'd always believed in giving her space to be her own person. That was part of a healthy marriage, right? Besides, I was busy too. Work consumed most of my time, and when I wasn't at the office, I was with the kids. In hindsight, I should have paid more attention. The real cracks started to show about a year ago. She became glued to her phone, scrolling endlessly even when we were supposed to be spending time together. She'd smile at texts but quickly lock the screen whenever I came near. Late nights out became more frequent. Her excuses, just dinner with the girls or running errands, started to sound rehearsed. And the intimacy that had once defined our relationship? Gone. Replaced with a coldness that felt like sleeping next to a stranger. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Maybe this was just what happened after 8 years of marriage. People grow apart, life gets busy, things change. I didn't want to seem paranoid or controlling, so I buried my unease. I told myself it was a rough patch, that every couple goes through them. I told myself it would pass. But deep down, I knew better. It was a random Tuesday when everything finally came crashing down. Lisa had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered, and something inside me, call it instinct, call it suspicion, compelled me to pick it up. She never locked it. She'd always said we didn't need to because we trusted each other. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart pounding. This was a line I'd never crossed before. But the nagging feeling in my gut refused to go away. I swiped the screen open. What I found shattered me. The texts were with someone named Brian, and they weren't the kind of messages you sent to a friend or even a casual acquaintance. They were explicit. Filthy. The kind of things you say to someone when your relationship is built on nothing but lust. My eyes skimmed through the conversation, each word hitting me like a punch to the stomach. I can't stop thinking about last night, Brian had written. You're insatiable, Lisa replied, followed by a string of emojis that made me sick to my stomach. But it wasn't just the sexual messages that hurt the most. It was the way she talked about me. He's so clueless, she had texted. Works all the time, barely notices what I'm doing. He's just a paycheck to me at this point. I dropped the phone like it had burned me, my hands trembling with rage. Clueless. That was how she saw me. A paycheck. The man who had built a life for her, for our family, was nothing more than an ATM in her eyes. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring blankly at the counter. My mind raced through a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, humiliation. Part of me wanted to storm into the bathroom, confront her right then and there. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, force her to explain how she could do this to me, to our kids, to the life we'd built together. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something held me back. Maybe it was the sheer magnitude of the betrayal, or maybe it was the businessman in me, the part of me that always operated with logic, with strategy. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore, it was about my entire life. If I was going to confront Lisa, I needed to be prepared. I needed to think. So I put the phone back exactly where I found it, forcing myself to act like nothing had happened. That night, as Lisa sat across from me at dinner, smiling and chatting as if everything was normal, I made a decision. If she thought I was clueless, predictable, weak, she was wrong. She had no idea what I was capable of. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring out the window, plotting my next move. Revenge wasn't just about getting back at her. It was about taking back control. About making sure she couldn't destroy the life I'd worked so hard to build. And if Lisa wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure she regretted it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The anger was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but now it had a purpose. It wasn't enough to confront Lisa. No, that would give her the chance to lie, to manipulate, to turn herself into the victim. She was good at that. I'd seen her use that act with other people, friends, co-workers, even her own family. She knew how to spin a story and make herself look like the wounded party. Not this time. If I was going to win, I needed to be smarter. I spent the day at the office, pretending everything was fine. My employees didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. They didn't see how my hands shook as I signed documents or how I stared at my computer screen for minutes at a time, lost in thought. All they saw was their boss, the man who always had it together. That was the mask I wore now, not just at work but everywhere. Even at home. Especially at home. Lisa, of course, was oblivious. That evening, she kissed me on the cheek like she always did, asked me about my day, and then disappeared upstairs to take a call after dinner. I didn't need to ask who she was talking to. I knew. I spent the next few days researching private investigators. If I was going to take her down, I needed hard evidence. The texts I'd seen were a start, but they weren't enough. Not for what I had in mind. After some digging, I found someone who came highly recommended, a guy named Mark who specialized in cases like mine. When I called him, I could tell right away that he was no nonsense. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just told me to send him the details and let him do his job. "I'll get you everything you need," he said, his voice calm and professional. "But you have to be patient. These things take time." Patience wasn't my strong suit, but I agreed. While Mark got to work, I started preparing on my end. I met with my lawyer, a shark of a woman named Dana who had handled some of my business disputes in the past. When I explained the situation, she didn't look surprised. She'd seen it all before. "Infidelity cases can get messy," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But if you have proof, you'll have the upper hand. Especially in this state. Judges don't look kindly on cheaters, particularly when kids are involved." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Start gathering as much documentation as possible," she said. "Bank statements, credit card transactions, anything that shows where the money's been going. And if you have any joint assets, we'll need to figure out how to protect them." It was like flipping a switch in my brain. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was a battle, and I was going to win. Over the next few weeks, I became a man with a mission. Every time Lisa left the house, claiming she was meeting friends or going to the gym, I felt a mix of rage and anticipation. Mark was tailing her, documenting her every move. I knew it was only a matter of time before I had everything I needed. At home, I played the part of the devoted husband. I smiled when Lisa told me about her day, nodded along as she talked about the kids, and even surprised her with a bottle of her favorite wine one evening. She looked genuinely pleased, as if she still believed she had me fooled. It took everything I had not to laugh in her face. The evidence started trickling in. Mark sent me photos of Lisa and Brian meeting at a coffee shop, walking hand in hand through the park, and even kissing in the parking lot of the gym. He got video footage too, grainy but clear enough to leave no doubt about what was happening. My stomach churned every time I opened one of his emails, but I forced myself to look at everything. I needed to see the truth, no matter how much it hurt. But the photos and videos were just the beginning. Mark also dug into Brian's background. He wasn't just a gym trainer. He was a divorced, cash-strapped sleazebag who had a history of hooking up with married women. I guess Lisa wasn't as special as she thought. The irony of it all was almost comical. She'd thrown away her family for that guy. Meanwhile, I followed Dana's advice to the letter. I combed through our finances, taking note of every suspicious expense. Lisa had been using our joint account to fund her little escapades, dinners, hotel rooms, even gifts for Brian. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw the charges, but I also felt something else, determination. Every transaction was another nail in the coffin of her lies. And then there were the kids. That part hurt the most. Lisa had always been a good mother, at least, that's what I'd thought. But now I couldn't help but wonder how much of it had been real. She still doted on them, still tucked them in at night and helped with their homework, but it all felt like a performance. Did she think they wouldn't notice her disappearing acts? Did she even care? I kept up my facade, but it wasn't easy. Some nights, I'd sit in the dark after everyone else had gone to bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of it all. How had we ended up here? Had I missed the signs? Or had Lisa always been this way, and I'd just been too blind to see it? The questions haunted me, but I knew there was no point in dwelling on them. The damage was done. All I could do now was move forward. The turning point came one Friday evening. Lisa was out, another girls' night, she claimed, when Mark called me. "I've got everything," he said. Photos, videos, even audio from their conversations. "It's airtight." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I'd been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. There was no coming back from this. "Send it to me," I said finally. "Will do," Mark replied. "Good luck, man." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to confront Lisa right then and there, to show her the evidence and watch her crumble. But I knew better. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about setting the stage for what came next. So I waited. I waited, and I planned, and I prepared to take back everything she tried to steal from me. Lisa came home late that night, reeking of wine and perfume that wasn't hers. She had that same smug, satisfied look she always had after one of her girls' nights. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't even look up from my laptop when she walked into the living room. That's what she expected from me, indifference. Cluelessness. The predictable husband. Little did she know, I wasn't clueless anymore. The next morning, I made us coffee, just like I always did. Lisa smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and thanked me, as if she wasn't tearing our family apart behind my back. I smiled back. I didn't feel anything anymore. The love I'd once had for her had been replaced by something colder. Not hatred, no, that was too passionate. This was colder, sharper. Determination. The kids came bounding down the stairs a few minutes later, and Lisa quickly shifted into mom mode, fussing over their breakfasts and asking about their plans for the day. Watching her was almost surreal. She played the role so well. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed she was still the devoted wife and mother she pretended to be. But I knew better now. And I was ready to act. The first step in my plan was to secure the house. Lisa didn't know it, but the deed had already been transferred into my name. Dana had made sure of it. Lisa didn't pay attention to things like property titles or financial documents, she left all that to me. She probably didn't even realize that our home equity account had been closed weeks ago or that the savings account she thought we shared had been emptied into an account only I controlled. Next, I started cutting off her access to money. I cancelled her credit cards one by one, claiming suspicious activity if she asked why. Her spending had been erratic lately, lavish dinners, spa appointments, hotel bookings, and I wanted her to feel the sting of losing that lifeline. She didn't notice right away, but I knew it was only a matter of time before she did. Meanwhile, I continued gathering everything I needed for the divorce. Mark's evidence was damning, but I wanted to be thorough. I printed bank statements, credit card bills, even receipts for the gifts she'd bought for Brian. Every piece of documentation went into a thick folder that I kept locked in my office. The kids, thankfully, remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I made sure to keep things as normal as possible for them. Soccer practice, family movie nights, Sunday trips to the park, I kept it all going, even as I plotted their mother's downfall. They didn't deserve to have their world turned upside down because of Lisa's selfishness. But Lisa's world? That was another story. One evening, as we sat in the living room watching TV, Lisa got a phone call. She glanced at the screen, her face lighting up for just a moment before she caught herself. "I'll just take this upstairs," she said, smiling sweetly at me. I nodded, pretending not to notice the way she clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. As soon as she disappeared, I turned off the TV and went to my office. I logged into the monitoring software Mark had installed on her phone. It was the kind of thing I never thought I'd resort to, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The software gave me real-time access to her texts, calls, and even her GPS location. I could see everything. The call was with Brian, of course. "I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice low but strained. "It's getting harder to sneak away. He's been, I don't know, distant lately. It's like he knows something." I clenched my jaw, my hands tightening into fists as I listened. She didn't sound remorseful. She wasn't worried about me, she was worried about getting caught. "You're overthinking it," Brian replied. "Guys like him don't notice stuff like this. He's probably too busy with work to care." I smirked at that. Brian was right about one thing, I had been busy. Just not in the way he thought. They talked for a few more minutes, making plans to meet later that week. When the call ended, I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Lisa was starting to get suspicious, which meant I needed to accelerate my timeline. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place the next day. Mark sent me an email with a recording of Lisa and Brian at a hotel. The audio wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to capture every disgusting word they said to each other. It was the kind of evidence that would leave no doubt in anyone's mind about what had been happening. I forwarded it to Dana, along with everything else Mark had collected. Her reply came quickly. "This is perfect. She won't have a leg to stand on in court." That evening, I decided it was time to put the next phase of my plan into motion. Lisa was in the kitchen when I walked in, scrolling through her phone while the kids played in the backyard. She looked up and smiled at me, that same fake smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, her voice casual. "Yeah," I said, leaning against the counter. "Actually, I was thinking we should do something special this weekend. Just the two of us. A little getaway." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of guilt cross her face. "Really?" she said. "That sounds nice. But what about the kids?" "I'll ask my sister to watch them," I said. "They'll love spending time with their cousins. It'll just be us. No distractions, no stress." Lisa hesitated, and I could almost see the wheels turning in her head. She was probably trying to figure out how to balance her plans with Brian while still accepting my offer. "Okay," she said finally. "That sounds amazing." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. While Lisa thought I was planning a romantic getaway, I was finalizing everything with Dana. The divorce papers were ready, the evidence was organized, and my accounts were secure. I even scheduled a locksmith to change the locks on the house while we were gone. By the time we left for our getaway, everything was in place. Lisa had no idea that the life she'd been so willing to destroy was about to come crashing down around her. She thought she'd won. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Lisa and I left for our romantic getaway early Saturday morning. She seemed unusually cheerful as we drove out of town, her fingers scrolling through her phone as she hummed along to the music. I caught her smiling at her screen a couple of times, no doubt texting Brian. The audacity of it didn't even faze me anymore. In fact, I almost welcomed it. It confirmed what I already knew. Lisa thought she'd outsmarted me. She thought she had everything under control. She had no idea what was coming. We stayed at a beautiful cabin in the woods, far removed from the chaos of our daily lives. It was quiet, serene, the perfect place to put my plan into motion. I'd chosen it deliberately, no distractions, no interruptions, just the two of us. Lisa was relaxed, even flirtatious, as though she believed this trip was my attempt to rekindle our marriage. I let her believe it. On the second night, after dinner, we sat by the fireplace drinking wine. Lisa was laughing at some story she was telling me, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something, nostalgia, maybe, or regret. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd built my life around. It was hard to reconcile that image with the reality of who she'd become. "Do you ever think about when we first met?" I asked suddenly, my voice quiet. Lisa looked at me, surprised by the question. "Of course," she said, smiling. "You were so shy. I thought I'd have to propose to you just to get you to ask me out." I chuckled softly, swirling the wine in my glass. "I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen," I said. "I couldn't believe you picked me." Her smile faltered for just a second, and I saw it again, that flicker of guilt, the shadow of the truth she'd been hiding. "You're still that guy," she said, reaching for my hand. "I know I don't say it enough, but I appreciate everything you do for us. For the kids. For me." I stared at her, my chest tightening. The words were hollow. A lie. And yet, for a fleeting moment, I wanted to believe them. "I love you, Lisa," I said, my voice steady. Her eyes softened, and she squeezed my hand. "I love you too." The moment passed quickly, though, and I reminded myself why we were here. Her words meant nothing. Her actions had made that clear. I drained the rest of my wine and stood. "I have a surprise for you," I said, forcing a smile. "Oh?" she said, her curiosity piqued. "Wait here," I told her, disappearing into the bedroom. When I returned, I was holding the envelope. Thick, heavy, filled with every piece of evidence I'd collected over the past few weeks. Lisa looked up at me expectantly, her smile fading as she noticed the serious expression on my face. "What's that?" she asked, her voice cautious. I handed her the envelope without a word. She hesitated before opening it, her hands trembling slightly. As she pulled out the photos, the receipts, the text transcripts, her face went pale. What is this?" she stammered, flipping through the pages. "You tell me," I said coldly. Lisa's eyes darted up to meet mine, wide with panic. "I can explain," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't insult me," I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. "I've seen the texts. The photos. I've heard the recordings, Lisa. You've been lying to me for months. Sneaking around behind my back. Wasting our money on him. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she shook her head. "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "I wasn't thinking, I didn't mean to hurt you, I swear." "Save it," I said, cutting her off. "I trusted you. I built a life for you, for our family, and this is how you repay me? By sleeping with some deadbeat gym trainer? By making a fool out of me?" She reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. "No," I said firmly. "Don't touch me." For a long moment, there was only silence. Lisa stared at me, her face crumpling as the weight of everything crashed down on her. "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, work through it, I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us." I laughed bitterly. "Us? There is no us, Lisa. Not anymore." She sobbed harder, collapsing onto the couch as she buried her face in her hands. I turned away, unable to look at her. The sight of her, broken and desperate, was too much to bear. That night, I slept in the guest bedroom. Or at least, I tried to. My mind was racing, replaying everything over and over again. The betrayal, the lies, her pathetic excuses. I thought I'd feel satisfied seeing her crumble, but all I felt was empty. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was Dana, texting to confirm that the divorce papers were ready to be filed. I didn't reply. When I went to the living room, Lisa was gone. At first, I thought she'd just stepped outside, maybe gone for a walk to clear her head. But then I saw the note on the coffee table. It was short. Just 3 words scrawled hastily on a piece of paper. "I'm so sorry." Panic gripped me as I realized her car was still parked outside. I rushed out the back door, my heart pounding. The woods stretched out in every direction, silent and still, but I knew. Somehow, I knew. I found her at the edge of the lake, sitting on the dock with her feet dangling over the water. She didn't turn when she heard me approach. "Lisa," I said, my voice shaking. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. I stepped closer, my stomach twisting as I saw the expression on her face, blank, hollow, like she was already gone. "Don't do this," I pleaded. "Whatever you're thinking, don't. The kids, think about the kids. They need you." She turned to look at me then, her eyes filled with tears. "I ruined everything," she whispered. I knelt beside her, my hands trembling. "We can figure this out," I said. "I don't know how, but we'll figure it out. Just come back inside, okay? Please." For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to her. But then she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she said softly, and before I could stop her, she slipped into the water. I screamed her name, diving in after her, but the water was dark and cold, and she was already sinking. I searched frantically, my lungs burning as I fought to bring her back. But it was too late. By the time I dragged her to the shore, she was gone. The rest of the day passed in a blur of flashing lights and distant voices. The paramedics, the police, the questions I couldn't answer. I sat on the dock long after they took her body away, staring out at the water, my mind numb. In the end, my revenge had cost me everything.